90 seconds after takeoff from LaGuardia, Captain Chesley Sullenberger heard a sound like hail hitting a windshield. Then silence. Both engines were gone. He had 208 seconds, roughly 3.5 minutes, to land an Airbus full of people somewhere that wasn't a runway. He chose the Hudson River. Nobody knew if that choice would work. Flight 1549 was supposed to be routine. A US Airways Airbus A320, tail number N106 US, pushed back from LaGuardia's runway 4 at 3:25 in the afternoon on January 15, 2009, bound for Charlotte with 150 passengers and 5 crew members. In the left seat sat 57-year-old Chesley Sullenberger, a former Air Force fighter pilot who had spent decades studying why planes crash. He was also a certified glider pilot, someone trained to fly without an engine at all, though he never expected to need that skill on an airliner. Beside him sat First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, who had met Sullenberger for the first time only 4 days earlier. Skiles was flying the plane. Sullenberger was monitoring. 2 minutes into the climb, just under 3,000 feet over Queens. Both men saw something neither of them could do anything about. A flock of Canada geese, a dozen or more, some weighing up to 14 pounds, flew directly into the aircraft's path. The birds struck the windshield, and both engines almost at once. Passengers heard loud bangs and saw flames shoot from the engine housings. Then came the smell of burnt feathers and an eerie total quiet. Sullenberger later compared the impact to being pelted by hail, except the hail was living birds, and it had just killed both engines at the same time. Within 2 seconds, he took control of the aircraft from Skiles. As captain, with more than 4,700 hours on the A320, that call belonged to him. He flipped on the engine ignition switches in case the engines could restart, and fired up the auxiliary power unit to keep electrical and hydraulic systems alive. Skiles pulled out the checklist for dual engine failure, a 3-page procedure written for pilots cruising at 35, 0 feet with 35 minutes to work through it. They had neither the altitude nor the time. They got through the first page. 21 seconds after the strike, Sullenberger radioed LaGuardia approach. Hit birds, lost thrust in both engines, turning back. Controller Patrick Hudson cleared him to return to the runway. Sullenberger's answer was one word: unable. Hudson offered Teterboro Airport across the river in New Jersey. For a moment, Sullenberger agreed. Then he looked again at his altitude, his airspeed, and the distance still separating him from any runway, and changed his mind. "We can't do it," he told the controller. "We're going to be in the Hudson." Hudson asked him to repeat that. There was no answer. Sullenberger was already flying the airplane, not talking about flying it. From the moment the birds hit to the moment the plane touched the water, 208 seconds passed. That's 3 minutes and 28 seconds to accept both engines were dead, rule out 2 airports, and commit to landing a 70-ton airliner on a river running through the middle of Manhattan. Something almost no commercial pilot had ever trained to do. Landing on water sounds gentler than it actually is. An Airbus hitting a river behaves closer to hitting concrete than sliding onto a lake. Come in too fast, or with the nose even slightly too low, and the fuselage can cartwheel or break apart on impact. Sullenberger had to glide a powerless jet with no engine thrust left to adjust his approach, over the George Washington Bridge with less than 900 feet to spare, then judge his height above the water using nothing but his eyes, since depth perception over featureless water fools even experienced pilots. He was aiming for a nose-up angle of about 10 degrees. He got to 9.8. Skiles called out airspeed and altitude the entire way down, because Sullenberger needed his eyes outside the cockpit, not on the instruments. A quarter second too early or too late on the final pull could mean the difference between a controlled touchdown and a crash that killed everyone on board. At 3:30 that afternoon, the aircraft touched the Hudson. Witnesses on nearby ferries described one solid impact, no bounce. Sullenberger and Skiles looked at each other, and neither man said anything triumphant. They were both thinking the same quiet thought, that it hadn't been as bad as they'd feared. The relief lasted only seconds. The rear of the fuselage had torn open on impact, and freezing river water was pouring into the back of the cabin. The air outside was 19 degrees. The water was 41. Passengers had minutes, not hours. Sullenberger opened the cockpit door and gave the order to evacuate, only to find the flight attendants had already started. People climbed out onto the wings and into slides that doubled as rafts. Some wading knee-deep in freezing water, a few jumping straight into the river when the wing became too crowded. New York waterway ferries reached the plane within 3 to 4 minutes. Deckhands used a rescue basket called a Jason's Cradle to pull people out of the water and off the wings, prioritizing whoever was most exposed to the cold first. 14 ferries responded in total. In under 25 minutes, all 155 people aboard, 150 passengers and 5 crew, were out of the Hudson and onto dry land. Not one person died. What happened over the following hours mattered almost as much as the landing itself. 78 people were treated for hypothermia, cuts, and bruises at makeshift triage centers set up on both sides of the river. 24 passengers and 2 rescuers were taken to hospitals. 2 stayed overnight. Flight attendant Doreen Welsh had suffered a deep gash in her leg during the impact and needed surgery. 61 passengers were bused to a community center in Weehawken, New Jersey, where they waited under blankets from the Red Cross until family members arrived to take them home. For the passengers, that night meant phone calls to loved ones, dry clothes, and the slow, disorienting realization that they had survived something almost nobody survives. For Sullenberger, it meant something closer to torment. He later admitted the first few nights afterward were the hardest part of the entire ordeal. He could not sleep. He kept replaying the decision in his head, wondering if there had been a better option, something more complete. Sullenberger retired a little over a year later, in March of 2010, after 30 years in the cockpit. The wrecked Airbus, its left engine torn away and its tail crushed, now sits on permanent display at the Carolinas Aviation Museum in Charlotte, the city Flight Funfine 49 never reached. The 208 seconds between the bird strike and the splashdown are still taught in cockpits around the world, a case study in staying calm when there is no good option left, only a least bad one. The investigation produced 34 separate safety recommendations, covering everything from how jet engines are tested against bird ingestion to requiring life vests on flights that never cross open water. Some of those changes took over a decade to become binding rules. All of them trace back to one afternoon over Queens. Every person who boarded that plane in New York walked off it alive. The pilot who made that happen spent months questioning whether he deserved the credit for it. If stories like this, the ones where the real record is stranger and more human than the headline, are what you come here for, subscribe. There is another one waiting for you right now.